This was a neighborhood where people did not worry about bad things happening, evil lurking around the corner. They just didn't.
We went into the house. That's when we saw the victim. Partially nude body of an adult female and just covered in blood.
This was one of the very most shocking and gruesome crime scenes I'd ever seen.
And it was just stab after stab after stab after stab.
Whether you knew her or not, everybody said, who could do this to another human being?
That kind of raised it to a new level, because now you're thinking, is there someone loose in Georgetown that is preying on women? It could be anybody. And that kind of thing frightens people more by far than knowing the name of the person that did it.
From the pulsating streets of big cities to Main Street, USA, no neighborhood is safe from the unthinkable. These are the stories of innocence lost, of communities changed forever. This is City Confidential. Right in the heart of bluegrass country is a city of contradictions, Georgetown, Kentucky. The home of ordinary people with a long history of doing the unexpected. It dates back to when the town was founded. According to local legend, in 1789, a Baptist minister conjured up his own spirits when he invented bourbon in his backyard. Then, in the 1860s, when the South seceded from the North, Georgetown, the city named after George Washington, went against the grain and supported the Union. When the dust from the Civil War settled, residents went back to working the land, transforming it into an agriculture hub, complete with horse farms for breeding majestic Kentucky thoroughbreds. Not much changed until the 1980s, when the city, built on visionary thinking, welcomed a foreign auto manufacturer to set up shop. Today, Georgetown's Toyota factory is the largest in the world, with a workforce that more than tripled the city's population to 36,000.
The influx of people and jobs improved the economy. Neighborhoods sprung up all around town. New shopping became available and restaurants opened up. Although Georgetown was always a nice place to live, the extra income from Toyota really helped.
Today, subdivisions built to accommodate all of the new residents sit alongside antebellum homes of families who lived here for generations.
Looks like a postcard. That's what downtown Georgetown looks like. It's like something out of a storybook, it really is.
Georgetown is a beautiful community. You feel as though you've probably walked back in time 100 years, in a good way.
But in the summer of 2002, the idyllic southern community that thrives on new ideas discovers there's a deadly line between the unexpected and the unthinkable. On June 6th, Georgetown police get a call about an unresponsive female in the colony, a subdivision where many of the area's Toyota employees call home. Georgetown Detective Tom Bell has just left his own home in the same neighborhood when he hears the call.
And so I turned around. And then when I got to the end of the street and turned left, I was like, oh my gosh, this house is, I'm right down the street.
Bell arrives to find Stephanie Olson, the 17-year-old who called 911, standing in the driveway. She appears to be in shock. She says she just returned from a sleepover at her friend Mary's house to find her 41-year-old mother, Diane Snellen, dead in Stephanie's bedroom.
We went into the house. We went up the steps, and as soon as we turned left and looked into that bedroom, that's when we saw the partially nude body of an adult female and just covered in blood. I see the dried blood, the pooling around her, the lividity that had set in, that it had probably been hours since this had happened. She had her pajama shirt on. There appeared to be a lot of trauma to the chest and trauma to the head. There was blood in the carpet. There was blood on her chest, on her face, and her hair. It was everywhere.
There are also clumps of the victim's hair scattered on the floor.
Thought maybe the hair is part of a struggle with the person that committed this crime. Then that kind of raised a concern, because how did it get cut? You know, I know she stabbed in the chest and she had shoulder length hair as she's fighting for her life and this assault is going on. She's getting cut, hair's getting cut off and falling on the floor. We could tell that she had put up some kind of fight. You could see some contusions on her face. You could see obviously some bruises and cutting on her knuckles and on her hands. Whoever had done this unleashed a lot of anger on the victim.
This was one of the very most shocking and gruesome crime scenes I'd ever seen, either in person or through photographs or videos. It was something that stays with you.
Police comb every inch of the house looking for clues. In the upstairs bathroom, it appears someone recently took a shower. They wonder if the killer cleaned himself off before leaving. They take samples from the drains, hoping to find a trace of him. Downstairs, they find more blood in the kitchen sink. They take additional samples.
We noticed there's no forced entry into this house. You know, there's nothing pried, nothing broken. There's nothing kicked in. So the victim either let this person in or answered the door and then the person barged in and committed this crime. You know, when you start looking at the totality of everything, there's a woman in her house. She's confronted by someone she knows or doesn't know. She flees upstairs. She's assaulted. Is she raped? She's murdered. You've got all these concentrated knife wounds in her chest. So what happened in this house? And then you're thinking, is there someone loose in Georgetown that is preying on women?
And suddenly, the little city known for contradictions adds another to its list. Beautiful Georgetown is now the home of a very ugly crime. Before police can even finish processing the grisly crime scene, a crowd of concerned friends and neighbors gathers in front of Diane Snellen's home.
They knew Diane to be a very likable and liked person. She had a great network of friends. She was a good neighbor. For this to have happened to her, I think was a complete shock to the neighborhood.
I saw the police cars there, the neighbors standing around and talking, all kind of led me to understand that something was wrong with Diane. So I walked up to ask if Diane was okay. When the detective shook his head to affirm that Diane was dead, I couldn't even begin to start thinking about what happened to her.
They said, Diane has been killed. They just brought Diane's body out of the house. I could have fell through the floor. I would have never thought that Diane would have never grew to be old. You know, it's been 19 years. And it hurts. Now as much as I said I wouldn't do this. I thought after 19 years I would be okay.
Diane lived in Georgetown for 12 years, but she grew up in a small town in northern Michigan. When she was 20, she married Stephen Olson and started a family. They had 2 kids, Stephen Jr. and Stephanie.
Diane's major concern was her children. She wanted to make sure that they were on the right path, doing the right things, and that they were good people. She loved her kids, couldn't ask for a better mom.
Diane's husband eventually moved the family to Kentucky for work, but the marriage fell apart.
Diane stayed in Georgetown, and she knew she had to get a job to support her children, and she applied at Toyota in Georgetown and was hired.
Her supervisors and coworkers had nothing but praise for her. She was good at her job. She had worked her way up through the ranks in Toyota, where she was no longer on the factory floor. Now she was, in quality assurance, and she had potential to keep going farther at Toyota had this not happened.
Diane met her second husband, Danny Snellen, at Toyota. They fell in love quickly and married after dating only a short time.
What I found most attractive about Diane was that smile. It just lit up every room it walked into. Yeah. Speaking for myself, I knew right away that was somebody I wanted to spend time with. She never met a stranger. She always had something nice to say, and with that smile.
But 8 years into the marriage, Diane wasn't smiling when Danny broke his wedding vows.
Diane had learned that Danny had fathered a child out of state. She knew nothing about it until someone revealed that to her, and for her that marked the end of the marriage.
We didn't fuss or fight or hate each other. It was just agreeable. We just went our separate ways. There was, I wouldn't call that amicable, but neither was there animosity. So it was just kind of.
For 3 years after the divorce, Diane juggled work and single motherhood. By 2002, her son had flown the nest and moved out of state, but Stephanie was still at home. Diane decided to jump back into the dating scene.
She wanted a partner to go and do things with. She loved traveling. She loved playing ball. She loved riding motorcycles. She was very adventurous, and she wanted somebody to share those times with.
Diane's current boyfriend was Robert Jones, who she had been dating for quite a few months at this point. They spent a lot of time together. They both were motorcycle riders. They would ride together. There was some indication that he maybe was more interested in her and more interested in a relationship or a long-term relationship than Diane was.
We started to find out from friends that when they're out socially, Diane's wanting to dance and she's wanting to engage, and Robert wanted to hug the wall and not get up and not interact with people. They just, didn't seem like they were meshing.
She thought he cared more about her than the feelings that she had for him. That it wasn't fair for her to be in a relationship when she didn't love him as much as he loved her.
And police learned that the night before Diane was murdered, she told friends she was ready to move on.
Diane said, "I think I need to get away for the weekend." And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "I think it's to my best interest to call the relationship off with Robert." She said, "I know he's going to be very upset, and I don't want to be talking to him all weekend about this. So would you mind if I come to your house, and that way I don't have to answer his phone calls, and I won't be in town. Well, Robert can just drop by and see me." And I said, "Sure, that's the plan."
She's telling her best friend, "I don't want to see him anymore, and I need to tell him." And the friend tells us it was going to occur that night on the phone. So now we're thinking, wait a minute, we need to find this guy and talk to him and find out, where were you when all this happened. And someone comes to get me and tells me that there's this guy here named Robert Jones, and he says he's, the big boyfriend.
When Detective Tom Bell talks to Diane Snellen's boyfriend, Robert Jones, he hears a completely different story than the one her friends are telling.
He told me that, he had been dating Diane for about 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months, that everything was great in their relationship, that he had talked to her the night before about 8 o'clock. They had a brief, maybe 15-minute conversation. Nothing of importance was said, and he rang off. If he's telling me that everything's great, and the friend is saying, no, Diane has confided to me that she's not happy in this relationship, she's going to end it tonight, and that was the phone call at 8 o'clock. Did he stew about it, commit this crime? She knows him. She's going to let him in the house. Could he have done it? I walked him through his alibi, and he said, I was on the internet looking up motorcycle parts, and I went to bed. I got up the next morning, and I went to work.
He says he was off his computer by 11 p.m. and clocked into work at 6 a.m. From the dried blood found at the crime scene, police believe Diane was murdered sometime the night before. And here's Robert with several unaccounted for hours.
He is ticking a lot of boxes because he's really got no alibi. From the time he logs off of the internet and the time he gets to work, he's not living with anybody. There's nobody in his home. So, could he be the one that committed this crime?
Detectives fan out across Diane's neighborhood to see if anything unusual happened the night before.
2 of the teenagers who lived in the neighborhood said when they came home the previous night of June 5th, that when their lights hit the front of Diane's house as they were turning, they saw someone crouched behind the bushes. And they said, we don't know who that was.
The only thing the teens are sure of is that it was a man. But since he didn't appear to be acting in a threatening manner, they didn't give him a second thought.
And then we had another neighbor that said they heard what they thought was a motorcycle rev and leave. Of course, they couldn't tell us where in the neighborhood they heard it from. They just knew they heard a motorcycle.
This could be evidence that Robert Jones went to Diane's house, snuck up on her, and then took off on his motorcycle. But a shaky relationship, a revving motorcycle, and a shadowy figure in the bushes isn't exactly proof of murder. Hoping to gather more information, police talked to Diane's daughter, Stephanie.
What about this guy your mom's dating? Is he very possessive of him?
He's jealous. They've never fought or...
That you've seen or that your mom has told you about?
That my mom has told me. And
Would she tell you?
Yeah, we were really close. Like, she would tell me everything that would happen between him and her.
Stephanie insists that Robert would never harm her mother.
We have questioned Stephanie about other men that might have come to the house to do any kind of service work, anything of that nature. And Stephanie could not offer anybody that would have a motive for doing this to her mother.
Police ask Stephanie when she last talked to her mother. She says they spoke on the phone around 10 o'clock the night before.
What was the nature of the phone conversation?
Me working full time, being responsible and getting ready to move out.
Was there any other topics discussed?
Yeah.
Okay. How was the call ended?
With a kind good night and all of you.
8 hours in, and the investigation is going nowhere. By all accounts, Diane is a great mother, a wonderful friend, and a caring partner. But when the autopsy results come in, it's clear that someone out there didn't think so highly of her.
16 wounds to her chest. You come to realize through the medical examiner that the knife just didn't go in a little, that the knife went in a lot. And, you're starting to see As you roll her over, there's exit wounds in her back. So someone is driving a knife with enough force to go into her chest, through her vital organs, and then come out her back multiple times. It was just stab after stab after stab after stab. And then you've got the cuts in the back of the head, and they're jagged, and there's no really rhyme or reason to them. So you start to wonder, are they trying to stab her in the head? Are they trying to scalp her?
The medical examiner determines the murder weapon is a serrated knife at least 7 to 8 inches long. Police never found one at the scene that fit that description. That means the killer took it after the savage attack.
So you start to wonder, based on what you know at the scene, and now what you're seeing at the autopsy, how does all this fit?
While detectives dig deeper into Diane's life, her friends and family honor her as they try to understand how something like this could happen in Georgetown.
She knew all her neighbors. They got together and done things as a neighborhood. She would never think it wasn't a safe place, or she wouldn't have moved there. She wouldn't have had her children there if she thought it was unsafe.
I can say the world was robbed of a very special person when Diane was gone, when Diane was taken from us.
And members of the distraught Georgetown community refuse to believe that someone here could be behind such a monstrous attack. That means they need to look outside. Diane's friends and co-workers put their heads together, trying to think of anyone who might have been a threat to Diane. Someone quickly comes to mind. Diane Snellen's friends and co-workers tell police there's someone in Diane's recent past they should pay attention to. A man she met on a business trip just days before she was murdered.
Diane went to Detroit for the weekend, and there were several Toyota workers that went with her. And she had called me and she said, "Nancy, you wouldn't believe I've done the dumbest thing." I said, "What?" She said, "I've lost my wallet." Well, it wasn't very long after that she called me and she said, "A guy found it and he's wanting me to meet him somewhere." And I said, "Well, Diane, you're not going to go by yourself. I know. Take some of the people that are with you at work." And she said, "That's a good idea. I'll do that." So when she met him in person over the wallet, he seemed like he was kind of upset because she had somebody else with her.
Of course, this person had access to her wallet, so he could see her driver's license. He could see where she lived. So he had a lot of information.
They tracked the man to a Chicago suburb, then enlist the help of local police to go to the man's home to talk to him.
And of course, at that point, he was like, "Oh, no, I just found the wallet, blah, 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 blah. I didn't do this, I didn't do that." So he gave them a detailed statement about where he had been, about his business trip, and where he was on June 5th and June 6th of 2002.
He was very cooperative. This gentleman was willing to provide a fingerprint sample for the police for comparison against prints found at the scene. They were able to confirm his story, and as a result, he was eliminated as a potential suspect.
But it doesn't take long for the police to get another lead. Friends and neighbors tell them if they're looking for someone who might have had it out for Diane, they should look a little closer to home. It was no secret that Diane and Stephanie's relationship was volatile lately, and most of the arguments were over Stephanie's first serious boyfriend, 18-year-old David Dressman.
Stephanie was a good kid when she was younger. When she started dating David Dressman, her personality changed, her grades were failing, and she was very combative when it came to anything that she wanted to do that Diane would not allow her to do. She didn't want to follow rules anymore.
Diane had made some mistakes in her life early with men, and David struck her as the type of person that was not going to be a good mate for Stephanie.
Diane told me she called David Dressman's stepmom, and Diane said that she was told that they were having problems with him and that if Diane knew what was good for her daughter, she would get her away from David.
Diane's friends tell detectives that the tension was on full display when David was disinvited to Stephanie's graduation party a few weeks ago.
We were all excited. Stephanie had graduated actually a year early, and we watched her open her gifts, and then Diane had a cake for Stephanie.
Stephanie had the knife, and she kind of made like a stabbing gesture over Diane's head. You know, kind of like a Chucky thing.
Diane kind of like leaned back and looked at her like, what are you doing? The rest of us were kind of thinking the same thing. Why are you doing that? But we thought she was just awkwardly trying to be funny.
We all just kind of laughed it off and went on.
But now Diane's dead, with 16 stab wounds to the chest. Police take another look at where Stephanie was when her mother was being murdered.
Her initial statement was pretty simple. I stayed the night at my friend Mary's house. I talked to my mom that night.
But when police track down Mary at her Georgetown apartment, they hear a much different story. Mary says it wasn't a typical teenage girl sleepover. Both her and Stephanie planned to have their boyfriend spend the night, and Diane knew it and was angry with Stephanie.
The phone call between her mom and her was not, I love you too, have a nice day, good night, sweet dreams. It was, I'm staying at Mary's house, no you're not, you're coming home. No, I'm staying here, slammed the phone down, and I wish you would just go ahead and die. Shortly after that, according to Mary and Mary's friend, Stephanie and David leave, which is not what she told us the first time.
Obviously, Stephanie is hiding things, so detectives call her in again. This time, they play hardball.
You told me that you stayed there the whole night.
I did stay there.
Really, the whole night? You never left?
No, where did I go? Because the only time I remember is when we went to Lexington.
She gave us a story about going to Lexington, which is the next city over, to buy marijuana and then come back.
Stephanie says after the call with her mother ended, she left with David for about an hour. When police check out her story, phone records verify the call with her mother ended at 10:30 p.m. and then her cell pinged in Lexington a half hour later.
We found the person she allegedly went and bought drugs from and talked to him. And he put the time frame in such that it would have given them over an hour or so unaccounted for after they bought the marijuana and came back to Georgetown. When the interview was concluded, I still had sort of an uneasy feeling about the way that interview had gone and her demeanor. I was still trying to gauge her reaction to this and figure out if that was her normal personality or if I was seeing something out of the ordinary.
But there's nothing to concretely prove Stephanie was at her mother's house during the murder. She becomes just another potential suspect police can't rule out. The Sunday morning after Diane's murder, 200 of her friends gather for a memorial ride.
I was amazed at how many people were there. People that I hadn't seen in years showed up. People that didn't work with her, that we met over the years as a couple, they all showed up. It was very endearing. So
it ends with the motorcycle procession through Georgetown.
I had Diane's urn in my car, and they had a big poster on an easel of Diane. And I had that poster in the back seat, and I was following her brother and sister-in-law to their home. And I'm driving, and I look in my rearview mirror, and I see her picture in my rearview mirror. And I said, well, this is the last ride you're taking with me. Come on, girl.
Weeks pass with no new developments. The evidence collected leads nowhere. All the blood found at the crime scene, on the floor and in the drains, was Diane's. The clumps of hair, all Diane's. And every fingerprint belonged to someone known to have been in the house, from Stephanie to her boyfriend David to Diane's boyfriend Robert.
You find all this stuff and you think, I'm going to send all this off to the lab and they're just going to come back with this, ta-da, and here's your person. And it just doesn't work that way. Where do you go? It becomes a waiting game at that point.
For 3 long months, the case lies dormant. Then detectives get a phone call from a prisoner in the county jail. He says he wants to talk to cops. Turns out, he has a lot to say. Just about the time Georgetown detectives are fearing they might never solve Diane Snellen's murder, they get a call.
We had gotten information that there was an inmate at the Scott County Jail named David Smith who wanted to speak with us. He had information that was important to our investigation. And he started to tell us about him being in jail with a young man by the name of Timothy Crabtree. And he said one night, they were in a pod, just the two of them, and that Crabtree started crying. He was upset. And when Smith asked him what the problem was, he said that he had been involved in a murder and he was afraid that he was going to get ratted out. Crabtree started to tell Smith about how he'd gone with these people to this house to commit this crime, that he was supposed to be standing guard. And he said he was standing out in front of the house, crouched behind some bushes, when a car drove by and he tried to hide, but he was afraid that they might have seen him and he was afraid he's going to get caught. Well, that was a game changer for us because we had not told anybody about what we were told about the person crouching in the bushes.
And if that's not damning enough, 21-year-old Tim Crabtree tells Smith his co-conspirators are David Dressman and Stephanie Olson. Since Crabtree is now out of jail, Detective Bell rounds him up for questioning.
His story was, he didn't know anything about anything, and he wasn't with them, and I'm done. Call my lawyer.
But when detectives ask around about Crabtree, they discover David Dressman and Tim run in the same circles. And it's well known that Tim fancies himself an expert on murder because his father is in prison for killing someone. The friends also say Dressman was impressed with Tim's reputation and asked him for advice.
There was a night where David and Tim and 3 or 4 more friends had gone out to a house. It's supposedly a haunted house. And while they were at the house, David posed a question. How do you kill someone in a crowded area, I don't know, like a neighborhood, and no one can hear them scream? And Timothy volunteered, well, you stab them in the lungs. That way they can't scream. So that now is like, well, wait a minute. Diane was stabbed to death in a neighborhood. Lots of times, in the lungs.
And as for the murder weapon, police learned that David Dressman stole a knife from the restaurant where he worked.
We were able to talk to the restaurant manager, and he told us that, yes, I had a knife go missing the first week of June. We had 2 of them, but one of them's gone. Here's the second one. It's the twin brother of the one that's missing. So now we've got Timothy's story to the inmate. We've got the knife that's missing. We've got them together. We've got someone crouched in the bushes. We've got all this stuff starting to come together. And we felt that we had enough to make 3 arrests.
But detectives realized that proving that a 17-year-old girl would orchestrate the brutal killing of her own mother just so she could be with her off-limits boyfriend will be a tough sell in this kind-hearted town. So before going public with the arrests, police want to make sure they have a rock-solid case.
David Dressman was 18 years old. He was in school at Scott County High School. He was just your typical student. I mean, he didn't excel. He didn't stand out. He was just kind of there.
Stephanie, she wore the pants in that relationship. She led the charge. She was in control, and he was somebody who would go along with what she wanted to do.
Stephanie wanted to leave and be free to live with David. They wanted to go off in the sunset and have their little life and be free of their parents.
But seeing is believing. That's when detectives, true to their Georgetown roots, try an unexpected approach. They get a court order and demand all local newspapers turn over any photos taken outside Diane's house the morning Stephanie called 911. And what they see isn't pretty. "10 months after Diane Snellen's gruesome murder, photos from local newspapers are in the hands of Georgetown police.
Stephanie did not appear to be in shock in any normal sense. I've dealt with hundreds of victims over the years, and her reaction was more or less aloof.
Stephanie is unique. She comes across as a demure teenager. But she could flip herself on and off like nothing I've ever seen. She could cry and then shut them off in a heartbeat.
I view her as like a sociopath. I would characterize her as almost completely disassociated from normal emotion with this particular crime. It's not typical of victims, and frankly, it's not even typical of most suspects.
Diane says sometimes when she would talk to Stephanie, it was almost like she was talking to somebody else. She said it was like my Stephanie wasn't there anymore. She said it looks like her, you know, and dressed like her. But emotionally, she wasn't there.
Certain that detectives have what they need, on April 7th, 2003, David Dressman and Timothy Crabtree are arrested for the murder of Diane Snellen. After cutting through a lot of red tape due to Stephanie's minor status, she is also arrested for complicity to commit murder. And when the residents of lovely little Georgetown hear the news and the gory details, they're horrified. Police believe it all started after Diane said David was not invited to Stephanie's graduation party. That's when Stephanie asked David to find a way to get Diane out of the picture. On the night of June 5th, things exploded.
There was a hideous argument on the phone. I believe that this was the moment when she realized she's not going to get what she wants. She has to go another way. I think that's when she decided to put this in motion.
After leaving Mary's house to go buy marijuana, cops theorized Stephanie and David stopped to pick up the self-professed murder expert Timothy Crabtree and head to Diane's house. When they get there, Stephanie goes in while David and Tim wait outside.
Diane is in the living room couch because she's waiting for Stephanie to come home because she's been told to come home. When she sees Stephanie, Stephanie storms up the steps. Diane follows her up there to confront her about the phone call and the disrespect and everything else that's going on. And then David comes in. Now she's trapped. That's when we think that the assault happens. When it's done, they position the body to stage it like it's a rape homicide.
And as if to wash themselves clean of what they've done, Stephanie and David shower and then leave the house to embark on their new parent-free life.
It was horrible. I couldn't imagine anybody doing that to anything, let alone a person, somebody that loved them.
I felt relieved. I felt for Diane, you know, that there'd been closure. And at the same time, I just couldn't help but grieve like Diane would be grieving that it was her daughter.
On May 27, 2006, Stephanie Olson is convicted and sentenced to 25 years in prison.
You could hear her yell out, gasp. Here's this person who showed basically no emotion during the entire trial, and when the jury found her guilty, she acted like she was totally shocked by it. Like as if she thought she could get away with this.
For the actual murder of Diane Snellen, David Dressman is convicted and sentenced to 20 years. Timothy Crabtree takes an Alford plea, neither admitting nor denying his involvement. But for testifying against David and Stephanie, he gets only 6 years for conspiracy to commit murder. As for Georgetown, the murder definitely left its mark. In this place where people are known for doing the unexpected, no one ever imagined that teenage lovers were capable of butchering a devoted mother who stood in their way. Yet it happened. And this is one devastating contradiction that will haunt this beautiful city forever.